Welcome to Polarized Opinions, the show where two elite poker players go head to head in a battle of wits and persuasion. Each episode features 3 lightning rounds of debate, 2 provocative poker topics, and 1 controversial hand analysis. Our contestants are randomly assigned which position they'll argue, testing their ability to craft persuasive cases regardless of personal opinion. When the dust settles, it's up to you, the viewers, to decide who made the most compelling case. Vote in the comments for today's most persuasive debater.
Question 1. Starting from scratch today, 2025, which journey would be more difficult? Becoming a top 100 cash player in the world or becoming a top 100 tournament player in the world? All right, Brian, you go first. 1 or 2?
2. All right, MTTs. Yeah, definitely harder. In tournaments, it's very simple. Everyone knows this. There's just so many more spots. And not only are there more spots, they're just more complex, especially with unequal stacks. I think by the time a beginner learns 30% of pre-flop spots, the top 100 guys who have already internalized pre-flop ranges years ago, now they're spending this time refining some niche formats like heads-up play and ICM, which are both completely different worlds. Yeah, in cash, you're just solving the same problems over and over. You could learn pre-flop in 3 hours, especially the open ranges, super simple. And then on top of learning all these fundamentals in tournaments, you also have to cultivate an insane amount of mental toughness because the swings are kind of ridiculous. It's just much of a more mentally taxing format. And imagine this, in cash, you just run standard bluffs here and there. You get stacked for 100 big blinds. Who cares? Rebuy. But in tournament, sometimes you're playing for days at a time, and all of a sudden you're on the bubble, and the stakes are much higher, and you might need to run a gigantic bluff where you don't really face this type of emotional hardship in cash, I would say.
My opening for cash being a lot harder is that, yes, it starts as a static game, which everyone's easy argument is that, oh, you only have to learn one spot. For me, I think that cash is so much more about understanding the nuances of how everyone plays within that ecosystem, whereas tournaments, all of the best players play it a very similar way due to the confines of what the meat of the tournament is between 30 to 60 big blinds, and there's not a lot of room for creativity, open exploit versus different opponents and stuff like that. Whereas the cash ecosystem is all about, yes, we have a baseline at 100 big blinds, but really the differentiator is how do we all exploit each other? And then we go home after the session and study all that data and all those stats. It's much more hands-on, opponent-specific study. Whereas you can do pretty well at tournaments by just sort of, yeah, I've done my 10 hours a week on GTO Wizard for a year or so. I'm getting quite reasonable at all the spots. Whereas a guy like that, his leaks are going to be exploited and exposed immediately in the cash ecosystem. In tournaments, you can fly under the radar being kind of a weakish player and still do fine. In cash, you're just going to get eaten up, especially if you get 100, 200, 300, 400 BBs in a session. You're really just going to you're going to be wide open in the spots where you never bluff or where you're getting over bluff and you undercall. Those guys are really good at targeting people that have those specific weaknesses. Whereas in tournaments, I think that we all have them and a lot of regs do, and they just don't get punished for it.
All right, Brian, rebuttal.
Yeah, Nick has a good point with having a lot of reps, deep stacked with the same opponents. But in tournaments, you're constantly facing all sorts of players nonstop, and it's hard to build a dynamic. And so with such little history with players, being able to find exploits, and I just think the amount of emotional intelligence you need in tournaments is much higher. And if you look at all the top tournament guys, they're all very funny people for a reason. They're all just socially very aware.
Nick, redirect.
All right, I'll go from start to finish. Okay, I already addressed why it being a static spot doesn't matter because really it's just about, as you get deeper, how each player's style builds. In terms of how emotionally taxing tournaments are with the swings and stuff like that, I mean, in cash, especially if you're playing deep stack, you could be stuck like 10 buy-ins in a bad session. You have to sit there, especially if you're a heads up cash player, you have to sit there and buy in for $1,000 and look at this guy with 10,000 across the table and somehow keep battling. Even though maybe you're not even at that point on your A game, you have to keep battling if you think it's a good spot. It happens in live cash too. You have a great spot. You need to keep playing if you're infinitely stuck. To play well when you're that stuck, that real cash and not just a tourney buy-in, that's much harder. Also, there are a lot of swings in cash, right? I mean, and especially the part in terms of where you're saying like deep in a tournament running a big bluff. I mean, some of the biggest cash spots I've ever had, the reason why it's such a good spot is because it's way too high stakes for me. Then I'm either playing too high stakes or with someone else's money and I need to run a bluff then. That's harder.
I've got massive news. GTO Lab just announced their Black Friday sale. And honestly, this is the best deal they ever done. Right now you have 25% off everything site-wide. That includes our masterclasses like Tournament Savagery or Multi-Way Mastery, courses that are praised by some of the best players in the world. And if you've been thinking about joining our subscription, this is the moment. Post-flop GPV sims, so you can train every node and spot with precision. The strongest ICM trainer with full table mode, so you can practice real in-game situations. Coaching videos with shortcuts, heuristics, and real exploits shared by our team of world-class coaches. They share the exact strategies they use in high-stakes games. So don't miss out, 25% off, only for Black Friday.
All right, question 2 is a long-winded one. Bear with me, guys. The biggest difference maker for players looking to get from mid stakes to high stakes is their social circle and who they discuss poker with. Nick, 1 or 2?
2.
1 kind of clears it up. 2 is a little ambiguous.
All right. Even though I love you guys and everybody I've worked on poker with in 2025, I could even watch you guys talk about poker without knowing you. So I don't think my network matters at all. I think, even as starting out, there's so much information available now between podcasts, GTO Lab, GTO Wizard, Solvers, PO Solver. If you're a hard worker, you're going to get almost all the way there. And then by the time you're there, maybe you can find that little extra with some coaching or maybe making a best friend that you might not even like, but you just want some poker advice from. But you can get 98% of the way there with just public tools, work ethic, and and you don't even probably even have to be that good at the game these days.
Brian, why is your network so important?
Yeah, I think it's just so important to have a team. There's a reason why all Fortune 500 companies are built and scaled by teams. Let's look at the best tennis players. They all build a team around themselves, and that's how they rise to the top. You end up getting different perspectives from guys in your group, share exploits that you weren't able to think about yourself, population tendencies, and there's kind of a camaraderie that comes with this too. Poker's such a cruel game, and to go through these swings by yourself, it's sometimes incredibly heartbreaking. So to have guys that you're able to build emotions to, and having some people around you that will lift you back up, I think that's just so important. And studying is a skill. You'll learn how to study in a more efficient way through guys you talk to as well.
All right, redirect, Nick.
All right. If there was a PO solver to become the CEO of Morgan Stanley or anywhere else, I think that, it'd be a lot different. I think it's easier to use poker tools to get really far into the career than it is to use, there's not really a script for me to become Federer, right? Like it's not in the cards for me. I don't have that. Gun to my head, I think, I could make anyone with public tools a pretty great poker player. And I think that, that doesn't really necessarily mean me as a coach. if somebody has the guidance of what to do, which is part of the conversation, then I think they can get almost all the way there with what's out there without a tight knit crew. I do think it is a tough game, and you might need a therapist or a psychologist in lieu of friends to deal with some of those swings you said. So I agree. I don't have a good rebuttal for that. That part, you need somebody, and maybe a therapist counts as part of your crew. So you're gonna have to have somebody deal with the swings for you. But the skills, I think you can do on your own.
Redirect, Brian.
Yeah, if you just nowadays look at some of these crews who show up to Triton, they're very large groups, and you could tell there's just so much sharing of information, and that's what really helps them improve so quickly. And I know for a fact a lot of these guys are from mid stakes, and I agree with Nick. There are so many spots in poker, and you could solve them all yourself. But when you have a crew who you get to study together, and you guys kind of assign each other homework, and you all collaborate, and you come up with these ideas, just having multiple brains is so much better than just being a lone wolf.
I'm going to piggyback and say, on top of that, a lot of people have a crew and it's a bad crew and it holds them back. And until you kind of ditch the toxic anchors, it's very tough to move forward in poker.
Well said.
If you're serious about improving your post-flop game, here's something important to know. A solver isn't about memorizing, it's about understanding poker. That's exactly why we built GPD Post-Flop, to give you a clear, simple way to develop your post-flop knowledge. To start, you can instantly see the number of combos, the EV, and equity of both your entire range and any specific hand on every swing. This helps you make better decisions about frequencies and sizing. The Strategy tab gives you instant clarity of sizings and betting frequencies. The Range Explorer helps you think in ranges and categories instead of random individual hands. The Runout Hotness shows you exactly which turns improve your strategy and which one works against you. For learning and remembering strategy, we created Flop Reports tab. It lets you review every situation across all flows, which texture favor you, which ones don't, where you can press with range, and where you can shoot check and polarize. There is much more coming, and we will guide you every step of the way so you can truly understand how the solver works.
All right, moving on to our third issue of the night, the fan favorite. We've got a fantastic Jonathan Jaffe hand, which one of you will have the great privilege of supporting, while the other will just make goddamn fool of yourself having to talk poorly of. So, Brian, 1 or 2?
1.
You are so unlucky, my friend. Nicholas, you get to support this fantastic pocket tens. All right, the hand in question is from just over a year ago in Montenegro at Triton, and it is the beginning of the 25K event, and Andrew Chen is going to open from the cutoff off about 180 big blinds into 3 regs, myself being the small blind, my reg status being in question from some of you after you hear the hand. And I 3-bet pocket tens. He goes 2.3 big blinds. I go to 11. Andrew calls. The flop comes ace 6-2 rainbow. And I'm going to go ahead and bet 20% pot. Andrew calls. Turn comes a 4 of hearts. I have tens with the 10 of hearts. I go B30 on the 4 of hearts. Andrew calls. The river comes a 7 of hearts. I bet 20%. And Andrew goes around R120, and we're going to call with tens, 10 of hearts. So, Brian, you have to dishonor yourself by attacking this masterpiece. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think right away from the flop, you were probably range betting, which I guess if you want to simplify your game, that's fine. But I'm assuming because you have a lot of suited connector and pocket pairs under the ace, you probably don't want to bet every time. But sure, you mix in the bet this time and he calls. Everything looks fine so far. But now I have a problem with how you play this turn. I just feel like you are playing this hand now in a way where you're just very face up. It's just the way I feel about it, at least. But also from a fundamental standpoint, all of a sudden, you bet all your bluffs on the flop, but he had a call that, sure, he floats some, but he's kind of condensed around strong hands now. So you should probably use a bigger size or check a lot, and a lot of your hands want to check here. All your pocket pairs between the 6 and the ace, giving your 6x. So when you want to bluff, I want to use a bigger size here, and I want to start folding out some small pairs, but with this size, you're never folding anything out. Then on the river, I believe as played, this feels really thin for value. If we want to bet the river, I think I would rather, with a 10 of hearts, go for a large size and try to get him to become indifferent with some ace-x. But it looks like you go for value, which I think is thin. I mean, he's at this depth, 160 deep, pre-flop, cut off first, small blind. He's still going to have jacks and queens. But you go for the small bet, and then now he puts in a giant raise. We just have a pretty shitty bluff catcher at this point. I feel like he can literally show you pocket jacks with the heart as a bluff, and you're just going to lose. I have a feeling that you thought because your hand is so face up, you have to defend against his raise sometimes, and you thought the 10 of hearts is good or whatever, so you called. But I think you were range calling, and I think if you talk to anyone, Andrew Chen's a very solid player who's just going to be very balanced in this spot. And you're unlucky he just didn't show you ace queen with the queen of hearts.
Nick.
All right. I think fundamentally, yeah, it looks good to me. Obviously pre-flop. Flop, I think you can just play a tiny size and bet all your pocket pairs between the 6 and the ace. So anywhere from B10 to B25 will do the job there. And then the flip side of that is that Andrew is not going to be able to fold a lot of his range. An ace high board is one where he can fold the most of his range proportionally, but he'll still have to call all of his pocket pairs every single time, all the backdoors every single time. I don't even think he has a weak enough backdoor preflop to fold, except for maybe queen 8, queen 9 of spades type hands, diamonds, whatever. But so he's going to be, the point is you're on a wide versus wide spot on the turn, which means that you're trying to hammer his pocket pairs again, and then maybe even clear out some stuff like king jack that missed the Broadway, which is just a win for you, unless you wanted to check and then start making him bluff. But there's also an element, obviously you're playing live poker and you might have had some sort of feel of what he did pre-flop or anything else to know where he's at in his range. I can't speak on that. But I would say generally the way these turn spots work at a lot of different depth tiers, if you have all these pocket pairs, he has all these pocket pairs, but the differentiator of your range is that you have the big ace-x and the big pocket pairs. You have top set here, you have ace king, you have ace queen. You obviously have those big hands more often, even if he does mix in some flats with them. So that being said, you get to use the top half of your pocket pairs in your big ace-x and punish the bottom half of his ace-x and his pocket pairs. And you can't just do that by going polar. So you're going linear, you're pressing, putting in more money with that part of your range that's just a little bit ahead of him, like you are here on the turn. And I if I'm going to do that, I think you went just over 25% on the turn. That looks good. It's enough to bluff and fold out his high cards. It's enough to make him call again with pocket 5, pocket 7s, pocket 8s, pocket 9s. That's if he doesn't want to get run over. That's part of the hand. He's probably paranoid he's getting run over by old Iftari because he's an old school player. He knows you. So he's probably going to be more sticky versus you than versus me or than versus anyone else. And you know that. You put out the small bet. Now you get to this river where you have the most decision, in my opinion. And you've decided that if you check, he's just going to show down a bunch of hands that you have beat. And if you bet, you're going to decide. I don't think you had a plan. And you bet super tiny, which if you did this with queens, I would think it looks quite normal. I do think 10s is thin, but at this point now, if he has something the whole question for me is if he has something like king of hearts, queen on the turn and doesn't fold, you're printing. Doesn't fold the turn. I think when you add that to all the pocket pairs, when you add that to a 4-5 of spades or diamonds, add that to maybe a creative, some kind of float that just went twice because of you. Now we're in the realm of he could be over bluffing, he could be under bluffing. Only John G knows because he has the keys to the streets that he brought him to. So I have a lot of faith in that, and so I'm a big fan of how you played the flop turn and you brought him to the streets on the river, and that's where you take people off tree and just make good decisions. That's how you make extra money. So I'm all in on that.
Brian, how do you argue with that?
Yeah, if we want to get into some live exploit type talk here, I think we're playing against someone, once again, he's very solid and very aware himself. He's been playing live poker forever. He's going to get to the river with probably too many strong hands, understanding what's going to happen on rivers. So when we just calculate the ratio of value he's going to have once he raises, I just think we're just unblocking so many value hands despite the 10 of hearts. And yeah, sure, he would probably bluff sometimes on the turn, right? With something like Jack 10 of hearts, King 10 of hearts. So by the river, once he raises and he lacks bluffs, I just feel like this call is losing infinite. It's probably losing over 60 big blinds in EV against him. I just think that we had a lucky range call here. Also with turn, once again, I just think it's really hard to balance his size, because what are we gonna do this with? We're gonna use pocket aces. We're never gonna use this sizing with ace king. We're gonna use 3 combos of pocket aces and then use pocket pairs. But then how do we know which pocket pairs to use? So all of a sudden, when we're just block betting the turn with all these pocket pairs, we're super unbalanced. And if now that I see this hand, I'm gonna start raising the shit out of you on the turn and taking you to the streets, and you're still probably gonna rage call me. So I'm just gonna have it. But yeah.
Okay. Good luck having it, bud. Minus 60 big blinds. Jesus Christ. Nick, talk some sense into this 60 big blinds.
All right, I'll start my rebuttal with minus. The only time I think you've ever made a minus 60 big blind play is like one of those dreams where your card changes, and it's hard to do that even, right? Like maybe if you turned over your hand and you had the 4 spades somehow, maybe then we'd be in the negative 60 big blind territory. But I would say this in terms of like the fundamentals of the hand, right? Like just because the solver is telling us we need to bet bigger check doesn't mean that you can't eke out the same amount of EV by having a bunch of small betting and just betting more often. And actually, versus a person, when you put that burden of defense on Andrew, it's probably making his life a lot more difficult. Do I want to do that with ace king? Probably not, because the hand just doesn't fit naturally into it. But do I need to play my whole range checker big bet just so that I can simplify and play a polarized strategy? That's obviously, it's way easier for Andrew to play against, because guess what? When I put in a bunch of money in a 3-bet pot on the turn with you, you get to fold your bad hands and call your good hands. John decided to take the middle of his range, which he could also do with like king, queen of hearts. Even aces is a fine hand to go small and try to get raised by a bluff or a worse set, and then you have him play for stack. And you could have the ace was not a flush card, so you could just have like ace, queen of hearts and be like, yeah, it doesn't make too much sense to just bomb this sick hand, right? So instead of checking it, I could just bet small like John did, put some hands in that, and be more confusing and more difficult to play against. And then when people react to plays like that, you get live information or bet sizing information or both, or a timing thing or whatever, instead of just being a guy on the turn that's like, oh, I pot or check here because I'm supposed to play polar. And it's like, yeah, Andrew has been playing for a really long time. He might be very good at that spot. He might not be good when like a guy that plays the whole table like he's playing a heads up match that tiny versus you twice, you get fucked up. Nothing happens.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen, for your participation. And if you believe Brian won the debate, please vote for Brian in the comments. If you believe Nick won the debate, you'll vote for Nick in the comments. And thank you both.
All right. Thanks, boys.
Hey, guys.